are coming back now. We are joined now by HermanKaslow, who is one of the producers of Atlas Shrugged Part 2. And I have to tell you, having read Atlas Shrugged, having watched the first version, I cannot wait for this to come out. And I will say thank you very much for spending a few minutes with Granite Rock.
Oh no, we're looking forward to it, Skip.
So, for those people who have read the book, and it's a massive tome, and I'll preface this by saying a friend of mine said, when you read this, when you read the first 80 to 100 pages, make sure you've got antidepressants with you, because what you're going to read is going to shock you. And I went at the end of the 95th page, oh my God, thank you for these pills. And it really, really gets to you and saying, this person, Anne Ryan, wrote this 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and now we're seeing it with the Obama administration. So I'm glad that you wrote the movie, or brought the movie out, Atlas Shrugged I. What can we expect to see Atlas Shrugged II?
Well, no, as you accurately pointed out, the book was written in 1957. It's about 1,200 pages. The author, Ayn Rand, structured the book into 3 parts. In April of 2011, we brought out Part 1, which followed Part 1 of the book. And so now, on October 12, 2012, we're coming with Part 2 of the book. And so that'll pick up where we left off and take us all the way through to the end of Part 2 of the book. But for those of your listeners who either haven't read the book or didn't have a chance to see Part 2 or Part 1, one of the things I want to point out is the way that we've written the movie, and to make it accessible to as wide of an audience as possible, is it stands alone as its own story. So we were able to sort of create a cinematic thread through the story that she's written, faithfully adapt the book, and create a movie that, even if you know nothing about these characters, you'll be able to at least understand what's going on very clearly, and more importantly, you'll be able to see the message and philosophy of the book. This book has inspired and influenced literally millions of people, and as you point out, the times that we're living has really made this book seem more like a newspaper. When she wrote it, it was really supposed to be a warning about what was going on, and yet we're seeing all these things unfold. And you mentioned the current administration, but you also need to look at what's going on in Greece and other countries that have sort of implemented the sorts of policies that are going on in this book, and the end result. And if you just look at the path that we're on, and you'll see, wow, this book is incredibly relevant, and hopefully we can all wake up to this so that we can see this is the path that we're on, and it's not a path towards prosperity. It's a path of really despair. And so hopefully, with this coming out prior to the election, the opportunity to get like-minded people into somewhat of a social gathering at a movie theater will give them a chance to sort of reflect and say, you know what, here's an opportunity at this election to vote for people who really believe what the founding fathers of this country envisioned when they drafted the Constitution, and just how far we've drifted away from those original principles. And now we've got an opportunity to get together as a community and hopefully effectuate some change.
One of the things I took away from reading the book was the whole idea of government pushing equality. It's for the common good, and the lack of respect for the rule of law, that government can become capricious when it thinks it knows best for all the rest of us. And unfortunately, you're seeing that the abuses of the rule of law over and over and over again by the Obama administration, and you're seeing the emphasis by the left and the mainstream media on equality. It's for all of us. It's not just the individualist that we're so used to from the founder's vision. So when you did this movie, and I'm no movie critic, I don't go to movies all that often, so...
Well, Hollywood doesn't make movies for you, that's why.
No, they don't.
It takes the courage of a John Aglioloro to take a book and say, you know what, I'm going to make this movie. Just as you said, not as this collectivist sort of view, but as an individual, I think it's important to get out and get that message.
Yeah. My question to you is, did you make this more of, here's an interesting topic, but my concentration is on the movie, or was it more on the philosophy? Now, how do we get it into a movie?
Well, that's a great question. When John and I set out to start to adapt the book, the most important thing for us to do was to faithfully adapted. The book is so important to so many people, and a lot of people never thought that during their lifetimes they would ever have a chance to see Atlas Shrugged made into a movie. So we took that very seriously, and we've tried to do as best we can to not reimagine the book, not try to change what the author Ayn Rand had envisioned, but rather, to try to execute that vision as best we could. We had to make several choices along the way. One was, at what time period do you set this movie? The book was written in the 1950s, but the author set it sometime into the future. So, for really budgetary reasons, we took the same approach and said, you know what, we're going to set this movie a few years into the future. And that allowed us not to have to get into too much science fiction and too much projection. And at the same time, it kept us away from making what we would call a period movie, a movie that took place back in the 60s. With how the book is so relevant to what's going on, one of the things that we thought about is, gosh, if people would take the book seriously through their acquaintance with it through the movie, maybe we can avoid what this depicts in the very near future. And so that was, some of the challenges. The other is that, and people have to sort of understand that, you have to make choices when you make a movie, because
how do you condense a 1,200-page book down to a couple of hours?
Yeah, exactly, and still remain faithful to that message. And people need to understand that producers of movie are limited by really one thing, and that's money. And so, because the amount of money that you have to spend on a movie buys you the number of days you can go produce the movie. So, when you're limited by money, you have to make those choices. So a lot of the choices that John and I made were, well, what are the scenes out of this book that are inspiring scenes, influential scenes that really give a flavor and feel for the philosophy that Ayn Rand was espousing when she wrote this book. So, people who are very familiar with the book, we didn't film every single page. That just is not possible.
Heck, most of us skipped a few hundred pages now.
Yeah, exactly. And what's important is that every scene that's in the movie has to have meaning for that particular movie. The movie itself has to stand alone. You can't expect people to go into theater and give you 2 hours of their life and then leave them hanging with a bunch of storylines that aren't completed. So, a lot of choices went into it, and people just need to understand that, in John's heart and my heart, our goal was to do as faithful an adaptation as we could.
Well, certainly, I know that with any taking of a book and turning it into a movie, there are always going to be the purists that are going to go ballistic. So it sounds like you're trying to address that at this time. But for those people who, excuse me, are looking at it from the philosophical standpoint, what is the message that you might be that you're trying to give to the folks who have read the book, understand it, and see the danger? But what about those folks that are going to come and be dragged in by that first group and say, well, what is this? And they kind of go, really?
Oh no, I don't think that they're going to feel that way at all, because I think they're going to be able to connect the dots between what's going on in the movie and what's happening in the world today. And what John and I made a priority in doing part 2 was to really capture the inspiring and influential moments of the story that occur in part 2 of the movie. And a couple of those are, there's a very often referenced a speech by Francisco d'Ancona about money, and in the book it's like 7 or 8 pages, which you absolutely couldn't do in a movie. So we've taken the essence of that speech and stayed genuine to its message, but at the same time, people who aren't familiar with the book are going to hear the words come out of this hero's mouth, and they're going to say, you know what, he's absolutely right when he's talking about money and the value, trading value for value versus people who don't work and yet they're receiving money or support or entitlement.
Yes. The moochers or the takers has come into the conservative lexicon, but I think your timing is impeccable, because we are having that debate because of a Kinsley-an gaffe by Obama. You didn't build that. First preceded by Warren, her first name, running out of Massachusetts for U.S. Senator against Scott Brown, who first said, behind every successful person. Well, you didn't build those roads, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. A horrifying and scary parallel to what the book talks about, where government says we are going to put ourselves first, and provides that onslaught against the entrepreneurial spirit of people. Since we're at the American Dream Summit, the person in the main character, Reardon, pursuing his dream of discovering metallurgical gold, as it were, this special steel, that was his American dream, and you roll that out and you see government snuffing it out.
No, absolutely. And you know, when you mention, you know, politicians, you know, making those sorts of statements, it's just an indication that really do not understand capitalism. You know, Ayn Rand was a staunch capitalist, and what this book does is it shows how in society, if government takes too big of a role, that it affects how capitalism and free markets work. And here you have people that are phenomenally dedicated, who, you know what, they want to go generate authentic wealth, not through fraud, but really through hard work, ingenuity, and tenacity. And the government simply doesn't stand for that or support that, and it treats them as victims. And you know, these victimized people over time eventually throw up their hands and say, you know what, I'm going to, in a sense, go on strike. You know, I'm going to leave it the way that I found it, and good luck with it. And what you end up seeing is that obviously the government cannot do the same job that the entrepreneurs of this country. Obviously the government didn't build these things for them. It was built out of their just pursuit of the American dream, their own inner desire to be entrepreneurs, to produce things for us, and that's what rings so clearly in this book, and why so many successful entrepreneurs in this country really stand behind and believe in, you know, what they learned and experienced when they read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that my time with you is coming to an end here. Well, I think one of the things that is most endearing to the conservatives, especially those of us who are Tea Party activists, were handmade signs when the Tea Party was doing the massive protests of "I am John Galt," and of course the left has no idea what that's talking about, or even could even consider. What do you mean you're going on strike, as you said? And I think it's the timing of this coming out and going further into that book is just a wonderful thing. And thank the Lord and the Supreme Court for Citizens United, because they can't shut you down under any pretext whatsoever. So, you know, HermanKaslow, I would love to be able to interview at later on at some future date, hopefully before the movie comes out or even afterwards, because everybody's going to start thinking, okay, it's a big book. What about part 3?
Exactly. So, you know, go to our website's AtlasShruggedMovie.com, where people can demand Atlas to their local communities. They can follow what's going on. October 12th is a big date. We need people to come support the movie, and love to come back and talk to you before then, Skip.
Well, we all at Granite Rock, New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, went and saw the movie.
Fabulous.
I thought you did a great job. Can't wait to see this. And I want to say thank you for taking a few minutes with Granite Rock.
All right, Skip. Thank you. Really appreciate your support and look forward to talking to you again.
All right, very good. Take care, and may you have much success, because you've earned it. Not deserved it, but you've earned it.
I'm with you, Skip. Thanks so much.
All right, take care.
Croc TV.